Okay, let's move on now. We actually over our time, but let me take a quick look at Tabarsee. He doesn't. He just tones down all kinds of stuff. All of the outrageous statements of the Shia really toned down. And his tafsir is much more like a real tafsir. And it deals with every verse from beginning to the end. He deals with qira'at. He's not just dealing. The early ones would sometimes deal with qira'at, but only when it made a point that they wanted to make. Like, for instance, they would say, "Kuntum khayra ummatin ukhrijat linnas." They say, no. This isn't the right recitation. It should be "Kuntum khayra a'immatin." Instead of ummah, community, comes a'imma, imams. It's talking about the 12 imams. Brought forth from mankind. So that kind of stuff. They would have all these bogus qira'at. Tabarsee actually deals with actual qira'at and not just ones that are relevant to Shiite beliefs. Also, asbab al-nuzul, those early ones, they'd only mention a sabab nuzul if it had something to do to support a Shiite belief. He would talk about asbab al-nuzul in general. He does a lot of linguistic stuff. And on any given issue, whether it's fiqh or aqeedah or whatever, he'll mention the opponents, the other people's points of view and their arguments, and then he will debate that and show why they're wrong. And of course, he's going to support the Shiite point of view. But explicitly, he said, some of our ashab have mentioned that the Qur'an has been distorted by the Sahaba, systematically altered, and he in his introduction said that's not really true. And he also tones down attacks on the Sahaba. But it doesn't mean that he doesn't have a negative attitude. He's doing it for political reasons. I mean, you get a sense of that from the verse in Surah Toba, which talks about if you don't help him, إِلَّا تَنْصُرُوهُ. If you don't help him, then Allah helped him. فَقَدْ نَصَرَهُ اللَّهُ إِذْ أَخْرَجَهُ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا ثَانِيَ اثْنَيْنِ إِذْ هُمَا فِي الْغَارِ إِذْ يَقُولُ لِصَاحِبِهِ لَا تَحْزَنْ إِنَّ اللَّهَ مَعَنَا. Allah helped him when those who disbelieved drove him forth, the second of two, when they too were in the cave, when he said to his companion, "Grieve not, indeed Allah is with us." Now, Tusi, who was a little before him and who he depended upon heavily, he said, none of this indicates that there's anything special about Abu Bakr. Even if you sometimes say that if an animal accompanies somebody, that the animal is a companion of that somebody. Okay, Tusi doesn't bother to explain, well, Allah is with us, how is that not praise or saying something about Abu Bakr's exalted position? But Tabarsee doesn't go into any of that. He says, well, the Shiite traditions stress that Allah sent down His Sakina only upon the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then, quote, "But these are better ignored so that no man can accuse us of anything." In other words, our enemies, no enemy of the Shiite will have, we don't want to provide them with ammunition. Just one example of, there's a lot of really interesting examples of this tafsir, but we'll just give you one. Verse 55 from Surah Al-Ma'idah, I made an earlier reference to it in a previous lesson. إِنَّمَا وَلِيُّكُمُ اللَّهُ وَرَسُولُهُ وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا الَّذِينَ يُقِيمُونَ الصَّلَاةَ وَيُؤْتُونَ الزَّكَاةَ وَهُمْ رَاكِعُونَ. Your guardian, or your wali, let's say, it's not translated. Your wali can be only Allah and His Messenger and those who believe, who establish prayer and pay zakat and bow down in prayer. okay, he quotes all these narrations about Sabab al-Nuzul, that Ali was making salat, this man's asking for charity in the masjid, nobody's giving it to him, and then he makes dua, oh Allah, I'm asking you, and nobody's giving you, and then nobody's giving me, and then Ali sort of makes a motion to him. And he comes over, and Ali's in ruku, and he sort of wiggles his finger, and so the beggar takes off the ring, the silver ring from his finger. Okay, and then this verse is revealed. Well, there's not exactly a close connection with it, but he brings narration after narration after narration, and according to our scholars, all of these are Tafsir. And when you have something there's such a political charged motivation for having something that will support your point of view, then when the motives for fabrication are very, very high, those kind of reports have to be dealt with extreme caution and minute inspection. Anyway, so he brings all these narrations that try to indicate that this is the Sabab al-Nuzul of the verse, and that according to that, the translation of this verse would not be who establish prayer and pay zakat and bow down and ruku. No, that last and would be while. And pay zakat while bowing down in prayer. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Ibn Kathir, he said this is ridiculous. What is the virtue of paying zakat while making ruku? The two don't go together. There's no virtue in it. But according to the Shiite, what it does is it limits those who believe to one believer. Because the only one who did that, who paid zakat while making ruku, was Ali. And that, there's a whole linguistic thing about the wow. Does that mean wow al-atf? Is it simple conjunction, meaning and? Or is it wow al-hal? And does it turn it into an adverbial clause? And Tabarsee goes into those details. And he goes into linguistic issue. What is the meaning of wilaya? What is the meaning of wali? Is this a wilaya of mutual love and support? Or is it the wilaya of the one who controls your affairs and requires of you absolute obedience? So Tabarsee says, it can't mean mutual love and support for such and such reasons, and because it doesn't mean that, then the verse has to be about Ali, because otherwise all the believers are being asked to be walis of themselves. So everybody's his own authority. That doesn't make sense. And that's how he disposes of a Sunni objection. Well, you have a plural word being used here. Those who believe, those who pay zakat. These are plural usages. Why are you interpreting it as a single person when there's a plural being used? He says, well, in the Arabic language, the plural is used for tafkhim and ta'zim in order to indicate that the person being spoken about is so great. Like the royal we, Allah refers to himself as us. So it uses that. Now, the Sunni explanation is that this verse, the whole context, the passage before that is all about alliances with the Jews and the Christians, and in particular in Medina, the Arab tribes had alliances with Jewish tribes, and when Islam came, then there was a tension between your allegiance to Islam and the Muslim Ummah and these previous alliances with the Jews. And so some of them began repudiating their previous alliances. And so this verse would indicate that that's the subject. That if alliances with non-Muslims get in the way of your obligations to the Muslims, then you have to disavow those allegiances. And your only allegiance then would be to Allah and His Messenger and those who believe. So for the Sunnis, there's a very powerful reason for mentioning those who believe. And it's not the wilayah of obedience per se, but allegiance. And then there's one other issue with relate to that. Yeah, he says if Al-Tabarsee, he criticizes the Sunni explanation that the wow is a simple conjunction. Those who establish salat, pay zakat, wa hum raki'un. He said establishing salat involves making ruku'. So if it's a simple conjunction, then the mention of ruku' here at the end is laghu, doesn't mean anything because it's already included in the first mention of establishing salat. But the response to that is that, well, it means something extra. Establishing salat is the fard. You pray it in Jamaat, you do all the arkan and the wajibat and the sunan, and your lines are straight and there's no gaps, and you pray on time. All that's iqam salat. Wa hum raki'un is something extra, that this is, in their free time, they're also making ruku'. And this is a very common thing where salat is being referred to by one of its parts. The Qur'an has that type of usage in general, and in particular, salat is referred to by either ruku' or sujood in numerous places in the Qur'an. So it's a referral to nafil salat. Anyway, that's some examples of Shi'ite Tafseer. I wanted to get to this contemporary one, but we really have gone over our time, and Allah knows best. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik.